From Software, legendary developer of the Souls series, loves to make challenging games that push its players to the limits. Demon's Souls, Dark Souls 1 through 3, and Bloodborne have all been fantastic games that have taught entire generations what it means to get good. However, after Dark Souls 3, the developer announced that they would be departing from the Souls series to work on new projects. The first of these projects would be Sekiro. Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, released in 2019 to critical acclaim and even went on to win Game of the Year. This success is no small feat, considering it followed up one of the most popular franchises in all of gaming. This means that expectations on Sekiro were extremely high, and even though it smashed them, some Souls veterans weren't happy with the game. While definitely in the minority, these fans seem to love Sekiro's presentation, but have a plethora of problems with the combat. So what was it? What caused these players that love the brutal challenge of Dark Souls, Demon's Souls, and Bloodborne to finally call it quits at Sekiro? I believe it's because the gameplay archetype of Sekiro is completely different from the other entries in the Souls franchise. That's why I'm here today to make the case that Sekiro is more like a fighting game than a Souls game. One of the first things Souls players probably thought was, what the hell, my dodge doesn't work, and that did not hit me. And to a degree, even though salty, they'd be right. In Dark Souls, dodging is a definitive answer to everything. Giant sword swing, dodge roll. Arrows, dodge roll. Magic spells, dodge roll. Existential dread. The dodge in Dark Souls has a ton of invincibility frames, and feels great and satisfying to play. You can be aggressive and up in enemies' faces, knowing that if your timing and reactions are solid, you can evade anything they throw at you. This makes Dark Souls feel like an elegant dance. Sekiro's dodge has far fewer invincibility frames, meaning that if an enemy has a move that has a lot of active frames, or tracks horizontally, there's a good chance you're getting hit, even if you time your dodge accordingly. So if the dodge is trash, why even use it? What function does it have? Well, the functionality is best illustrated with another game, Tekken 7. In Tekken 7, characters can perform a sidestep to either direction. This sidestep will beat moves that are linear, leaving your opponent wide open to counterattack. Seems pretty strong, but some attacks can only be sidestepped to one side, and other attacks track and can't be sidestepped at all. This makes the sidestep in Tekken not a universal defensive dodge mechanic, but more of a punish for linear moves. And this is the exact same way the dodge is meant to function in Sekiro. Or should I say, sidestep. Many enemies will have these linear moves that if you successfully sidestep, they are wide open for a free hit. But this answers only half the initial question. If I can't dodge everything like in Dark Souls, how do I deal with enemies attacking me? And there is no definitive answer to that question, and that in my opinion is the beauty of Sekiro's combat, and the biggest parallel between fighting games. A linear jumping attack, sidestep. A predictable slow sword swing, block and parry. A low hitting sweep, jump. A Guardian 8 command grab, pray. And that's not even mentioning your ninja tools. For the cost of spirit emblems, you can use the umbrella to block attacks, or the Raven's Feather to auto-dodge and disappear behind enemies. These are incredibly powerful defensive options at your disposal, but they're in limited supply. I like to think of them as metered reversals in Street Fighter. In Street Fighter, for the cost of 1 bar, you can use an invincible move that can get you out of a sticky situation when your opponent is pressuring you. Same goes for Sekiro, at the cost of spirit emblems instead. All of these options serve to add depth to Sekiro, and force the player to think and make meaningful choices in each enemy encounter. And I know what you must be thinking right now. I've glossed over the most important defensive option in Sekiro, blocking. But don't worry, blocking and parrying are the cornerstones of Sekiro's combat, and well worthy of their own section. For many of enemy attacks in Sekiro, your best defensive option is to just block the attack. But it's not as simple as just pressing and holding a button. If you time your block correctly, you will deflect the attack, dealing bonus posture damage and giving an opportunity to punish. Now, where have I seen this before? Street Fighter Third Strike is the first place my mind goes to anytime a game has a timing-based parry, and for good reason. The parry in Third Strike is so well implemented and really makes attackers think twice about throwing out moves predictably. Sekiro borrows from this, and it greatly allows a skilled player to shine by being a deflection god. It also further adds depth to enemy encounters, as knowing their attack timings can be the difference between overcoming them or losing horribly. And that isn't the only fighting game mechanic Sekiro implements in its blocking system, although this next one gets a little more technical into the nitty-gritty. In a fighting game, when an opponent attacks you repeatedly while you're blocking and leaves no gaps for you to reversal, it's called a block string. An opponent could also leave gaps in their attacks, where you might think you have timed the counterattack, when in reality you don't and you end up getting hit. This is called a frame trap. Sekiro has its own versions of block strings and frame traps. When certain enemies attack you, it'll be a series of sword swings that'll lock you into blocking for the entire onslaught. When the block string is done, the majority of the time the enemy is open to be punished. Many times, however, the enemy will have pauses in their attack strings that bait the player into trying to take their turn and attack, where they then eat a lot of damage. This ambiguity adds another element the player must think about in battle, and really adds to the dueling samurais motif of the game. This also isn't the only ambiguity Sekiro's combat introduces. The textbook standard mix-up in a fighting game is known as the high-low throw mix-up. If an opponent attacks high, you must block standing. If an opponent attacks low, you must crouch block. And if the opponent tries to throw, you must be ready and break the throw. It's called a mix-up because at any given time, which of these three methods of attack they will choose is uncertain. Sekiro has its very own version of this in the perilous attack system. When a red kanji symbol appears above opponents' heads, the next attack they do will either be a sweep you must jump, a thrust you must makiri counter or sidestep, or a throw you must dodge. This makes up its very own version of the high-low throw mix-up, and many bosses will even make it very ambiguous as to which option they are about to go for, forcing players to be on their toes anytime the symbol appears. I've heard many players complain that this system forces players to guess correctly, but I disagree. Sekiro gives the player enough time to react to the attack, and has options that vary in both risk and reward to give great players another method to really kick some ass. A lot like fighting games. My final point comparing Sekiro's game design to that of fighting games is the matchups and archetypes of the game's bosses. Each boss in Sekiro is completely unique, and fights using different techniques and styles, much like the diverse character roster of a fighting game. Chained Ogre is a deadly grappler who fights at extremely close ranges, similar to Zangief. Lady Butterfly is highly mobile, dashing all over the place and standing on her threads, a lot like Vega. Gyobu Oniwa Masataka has big range on his spear attacks, and can also charge in on his horse, reminding me a bit of Balrog. Genichiro fights aggressively with his sword, and can pressure at the mid-range with his bow, much like Ken. Guardian Ape has brutally high damage and grabs, and strong striking attacks, like Hugo. Shinobi Owl has a ton of tricky zoning tools, and attacks that makes players hesitant to approach, kind of like Guile. Emma has flurries of high damaging mix-ups and pressure, but is herself fragile, similar to Cammy. Ishin fights with an honest fundamental-based sword style, like Ryu, before turning into Evil Ryu in Phase 2. Corrupted Monk fights with huge range sword attacks, and has a large roster of pokes, like Chun-Li. Ishin Sword Saint is that piece of garbage fighting game boss from the arcade that you'd never beat as a kid. Good lord, this guy is nuts and can do everything. And Demon of Hatred is just a Dark Souls boss. In conclusion, Sekiro is a game that borrows a lot of ideas and mechanics from fighting games of the past, and implements them in a way that really elevates its gameplay to an amazing level that allows players to feel the blood-pumping intensity of a samurai duel. I'm extremely excited to see what From Software will create next, and I can't wait to bring you guys more fighting game related content. Streetfighter V Cammy Beginner Breakdown should be out tomorrow, and thanks for watching.